53 MiG. Captain Pundit sat in the not-so-large cockpit of the MiG-27, looking at a piece of the Times of India. He had been sitting for a few hours, and he suspected that the order to attack might not be issued just like yesterday. The temperature on the runway reached 40 degrees Celsius, and the cabin was a little more comfortable because of a rumble of cold windmills that continuously sent air conditioning. It was the 7th day of the war, and the 3rd day that Captain Pundit sat at the end of the runway waiting for the order to attack. When he turned his head, he could see the squadron leader, Mukunda, who was resting slightly in the command tower in the distance. He was walking around in the command tower at this time, and he must have been waiting for instructions from above. The captain shook his head and continued to read his paper. The headline of the newspaper was the Prime Minister's stern condemnation of Pakistan's bombing of a village in the Cyber district, with Khan saying, "Only cowards attack civilians again and again, and Pakistan's Air Force is undoubtedly one that does not dare to face combat. A coward who will only harm civilians." The other contents of the newspaper, without exception, are all related to the war. In an inconspicuous corner, the captain suddenly saw a report released by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs exposing a major power in East Asia. In the list of weapons aid to support the Pakistani government's resistance, the author of the article wrote, "There is no doubt that the Pakistani government is behind the terrorists, and the Pakistani government seems to be the shadow of a certain power. Chinese people see that such words will not have any effect. China's assistance to Pakistan has always been open." However, the list of weapons caught the captain's attention. Behind the numerous tanks and armored vehicles, there is a model of fighter jets. Pakistan has a small territory, and their air force has no experience in using heavy fighter jets, but from the list, it seems that they are about to get a heavier twin-engine fighter jet. For a long time, Pakistan has a front-line fighter group with well-trained pilots as the core. Most of the models from Mirage 3 to J-7P to F-16 are light fighters. A big weakness of these aircraft is that the radius is not large enough. Except for the small number of F-16 Berk 52s, other fighters, including the new Thunderbolt, did not fly very far. If they have a few aircraft like the Su-30, for the MiG-27 of the 29th Scorpion Squadron, which relies on sneak attacks to hit ground targets, there are many fewer loopholes that can be exploited. "Captain Scorpion, please check the aiming pod during the day," said the squadron commander's voice on the radio. "It looks like the above command has finally arrived." "Understood." The captain turned on the power of the HUD and looked slightly into the distance. Now he needed a slightly further reference to adjust the pitch angle. There happened to be a person standing 1 kilometer in front of the plane, probably the guard at the end of the runway. He moved up the square frame representing the camera's field of view on the HUD, aimed at the guy who was leaning under the big tree in a daze, and then turned on the power of the TV monitor. Adjusted to the maximum magnification ratio, the guy who was standing and smoking a cigarette clearly appeared in the center of the screen. His violation of the discipline of the Alliance was discovered, and he didn't even realize it. "The monitor is working properly. Check the instruments and the weapon system." The captain took some time to check the electronic instruments and the main weapon switch on the plane again, and made sure that the instruments were all in working condition. It is a skill to operate this plane. The job is actually much harder than flying those huge and expensive Su-30 fighter jets. The instrumentation is normal, the weapon system is normal. The mission has been issued, and the Scorpion squad is ready to take off. Good luck to you guys. As soon as the squadron leader finished speaking, a ground crew climbed up from a ladder on one side, checked the pilot's helmet, and adjusted the head cushion at the same time. The captain took this opportunity to hand over the newspaper to him and asked him to keep it for him. He still had time to read the article about the new aircraft that the enemy might appear, and he hoped to read it later in the evening. The cabin cover was lowered slowly, and the captain took a deep breath. He knew the danger of today's mission. The dam was a heavily fortified area. The new reconnaissance information showed that some anti-aircraft guns and radar systems were deployed. At the top of the dam, when the plane is approaching in level flight, no matter how low it flies, the opponent will have a long time to aim. The ground crew made a gesture to him to start the engine in front of the nose. The captain pressed the power supply to start the engine, and with a shudder, the engine speed began to slowly increase on the instrument. There was no need to carry a drop tank for this mission, so the captain turned the fuel pump switch and set the fuel selection to the wing tank. He looked at another MiG-27 that was starting its engine by the runway, and Lieutenant Elish in the cockpit made him a V sign for victory. This plane will take off at the same time as itself, and then the other two planes will follow closely and complete the sneak attack together. Of course, it will not be difficult to hit such a large target, but I hope to use 4 200 kilograms warheads to go destroying a dam must be wishful thinking. The jury is still out on how many warheads it would take to attack such a dam, which may be why the Air Force needs a real attack as a basis for its assessment. However, there is a conservative estimate. It takes dozens of direct hits with a 1-ton warhead to break down such a concrete gravity dam. The tactical air force of most countries in the world does not have such a large bomb. Maybe the United States has it, but they will not provide it to India. Scorpion 1 is requesting takeoff. The runway is clear and ready to take off at any time. Understood. The takeoff action of the MiG-27 is quite complicated. In addition to the throttle stick, there is a wing-swept wing angle control stick beside the left hand. It needs to be moved at the same time to fix the wing at an angle. This angle determines the takeoff distance. The design of the MiG-27 was a trendy technology in the 1960s, but it has long disappeared in modern aircraft, and the MiG-27, as a relic of the Cold War era, still retains the variable swept wing technology. When the engine speed reached 50%, the captain released the brakes, and the plane began to roll slowly. He turned his head and saw Airaish No. 2 also spread its wings and rolled behind him. 2 planes flew off the runway one after another, and then the other 2 planes took off from the Jorbut base. All the 4 pilots who participated in the attack were selected from the archives by the Air Force staff. Each of the 18th Flying Bullets squadron based in Kalikanda has more than 1,000 flying hours and has participated in at least one actual combat. The early part of the mission was not dangerous because the Jhelum Dam was close to the Indian border, so the planes could approach the target in close formation on the Indian side. Hopefully don't run into those goddamn F-16s today, Arish from Unit 2 said on the radio. What I'm really worried about is the Stinger missiles on the ground. Once they bite you, no one will notify you, Captain Pundit said. This is his experience. The MiG-27 can easily get rid of the Stinger missile as long as the afterburner is turned on, but this small anti-aircraft weapon is difficult to find. Experienced shooters will choose a side-to-air timing to launch the missile, which made it difficult for MiG pilots with a narrow field of view to see the missile's spiraling wake. Especially when approaching the bombing area, the pilot's line of sight must turn away from the front and look down at the TV monitor under the cockpit. At the same time, due to the need to drop the bomb, the speed must be reduced to about 500 km/h, which is the most vulnerable and dangerous moment.